Just to start off with, when we questioned Alex Salmon at the last meeting, he gave a very clear description of how the Cabinet worked. And I think, to quote his word, the big discussion of the Cabinet was always the infrastructure plan, and that he would have known if anyone was dragging their feet. And he picked me up for suggesting that Alec Neil could be dragging his feet, so that couldn't be happening, and that a minister would have come to him if there was a problem with the delay. Do you see that's the way your Cabinet worked as well?
Again, I'll be slightly light-hearted here. I sometimes hear descriptions of how Mr Salmon's Cabinet operated, and I wonder if I was part of the same one.
Well, putting that to one side...
I'll just leave it there. Can I answer the question? Where he's absolutely right is that if we think about the period around the financial crash and after that, infrastructure was a central priority of government. Infrastructure is always a priority of government, but in terms of the economic situation we were facing, the drive to try to drive economic activity through infrastructure projects was absolutely a central focus, and Alec was absolutely pushing that. So that is the case. In terms of how my government, I had, as I say, I think my reputation is probably more of a hands-on micromanager than my predecessor was. So yes, I would be involved in issues that needed to be resolved or pushed on, or where there were issues or I thought things weren't moving fast enough and Cabinet Secretaries would come to me, I would go to Cabinet Secretaries. That's the nature on a day-to-day basis of how government works.
Okay, so using the figure that you used this morning, which was interestingly the same figure that I came up with, that it would probably be a 6-year project to build it. And with my experience of compulsory purchase orders and how they actually work, they take a minimum, or can take a minimum, of 3 years to get through by the time you've gone through the whole process of issuing notices, getting confirmation of the government, issuing the orders, speaking to the owners, public inquiry, if that's the way it's going to go. That means that it would take 9 years. So effectively, if you were going to be building the A9 by 2025, alarm bells should have been ringing in 2017-18 that process wasn't entirely moving along at the pace it needed to be. Would you agree with that synopsis?
I think where I would take some issue with how you've characterised it is that a lot of the work was ongoing at that point. So, you know, much of the preparatory work, to use that catch-all phrase, was ongoing. So, you know, we're now sitting in a position where I think, with the exception of one of the sections of the route, all of the orders are in place. So it wasn't the case that none of that was progressing. The 6 years, of course, was an estimate that was made way back, I think, about the construction period. The significant issue, not the only issue, but the significant barrier we were grappling with at that point was funding. Funding options in terms of the coming up with a private finance possibility versus the pressure on our capital programme. So you can have everything else in place, you can have, you know, all of the preparatory work done, but you need to have routes to funding and procurement, and that was the aspect of this that was the significant or most significant challenge.
With respect, the funding is critically important. I accept that fully, but what I've laid out to you is a timescale that a surveyor and people working within the industry would set to deliver the project, which I think from the moment you issue the first order would be approximately 9 years. And that takes us back, and which is why I'm confused that it only came to light in 2023, when it actually probably should have been coming to light back in 2017. So my question is, Mr Youssef, who was the Transport Minister in 2017-18, did he come to you and tell you there was a problem? Because if he didn't, then we probably found out where the delay started from.
I think that would be an unfair characterisation of his position. I don't recall a particular occasion where he came to me and said, First Minister, we've got a big problem with the A9. But we were always looking at the progress and the issues we were grappling with. I think it's important not to be overly binary about this. Of course, it was the case that by the time you get to 2017, 2018, we realise that there are significant hurdles along the way to completion on target. It was only at that late 2022, early 2023 point that it was clear that there was no viable route to 2025, and that was a funding issue. Again, obviously a lot of the work that was necessary to get the sections of the project into construction was being done, had been done, so things were progressing and moving along. So it wasn't a sort of binary thing of here we are one day with none of the work done and we don't have enough years left to do it. It was an ongoing process that we were determined to try to find a route to 2025. It was a diminishing prospect the closer to that you got. Obviously, that stands to reason. And we reached a point where it was clear there was no viable route to that. So I suppose if I was to kind of turn that question back, maybe the criticism that can be made is we were so determined to try to find a route that maybe we didn't tell ourselves quickly enough that that wasn't there. But if that is a valid criticism, it came not from a lack of priority or a lack of determination. It probably came from the opposite of desperately wanting to get to a position where we could deliver the target.
Okay, my final question is that I don't doubt your determination to deliver it, but it was clearly unfeasible by 2017 and 18, even by the figures that you've given. And surely that would have been the time to tell the people across the Highlands that it wasn't going to be delivered. Because, since that date, I think there'd be very few people in the Highlands that haven't seen or know somebody that's been killed as a result of the road. And I think we've been dishonest, or you've been dishonest by the fact that it's not deliverable by the date that your government promised in 6th of December 2011.
So I think both the points I would make in response to that I've already made, so forgive me for repeating myself. Firstly, it was not the case that government, the advice to government was still that there was a viable route to 2025 until that point. Well, that was the advice to government. And that was now, that viable route depended on capital provision being made available, and that was a significant challenge. So that's my first point. So to say that we were just being dishonest, I think is not the case. The second point, though, is when I think I made in my first answer to the convener, yes, I look back in that period and think we should have been airing this perhaps more publicly. I certainly think that is a reasonable question to pose. But if we were guilty of something at that point, it was trying our hardest to find the route to 2025 and perhaps taking too long, and this is where I'm happy to concede, we maybe just took too long to accept that it wasn't possible. But if that's the case, it was for the best of reasons. Everybody who has or knows someone who has lost someone in the A9, my condolences and heart goes out to every single person in that position. The dualling of the A9 has been a priority for the Scottish Government. It has encountered significant challenges. It was always going to, but some additional challenges. I don't believe it's the case that we're sitting here today because government just didn't give it enough priority. But there is absolutely no doubt that the priority has to be attached to this until that commitment is met. And I am absolutely of the view, going back to the question Fergus asked me, is that the government has an obligation to make sure that the revised timetable is now met and met in full.